What if I told you that the most dangerous weapon in a modern American office isn't, an aggressive boss or a sudden layoff or even a brutal performance review,
Right.
but a simple, brightly colored smiley face emoji?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds totally absurd when you put it that way.
It really does.
But if you look at the actual data on workplace psychology that we're going through today, that little yellow circle carries way more psychological weight than an actual screaming match.
Which is wild to think about, because we usually think about professional communication as this, this clean engineered process, right?
Right, exactly, like cause and effect.
Yeah, you ask a direct question, you get a direct answer. It's like if you break your arm, the doctor looks at an x-ray, points to the jagged white line and says, hey, there's the break. It's completely visible.
Oh, for sure.
But you step into the world of the white-collar America workplace, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just completely shattered.
Yeah, it's diagnostic muddy waters.
Yeah, right. We're looking at a communicative landscape that is murky and confusing and honestly just filled with traps.
And what makes it so endlessly fascinating to analyze is what's the paradox at the heart of it all.
Yes, the global paradox. Because if you travel or, if you ask professionals operating outside of the United States, there is a very specific, almost cinematic stereotype of the American professional.
Oh, absolutely. The cowboy.
Exactly. The reputation is that Americans are straight shooters. They're blunt. They value plain speaking above all else. Tell it like it is.
That is the enduring mythology for sure. And to be fair, you do actually see that dynamic in certain arenas.
Like where?
Well, if you watch an American sales pitch or a political debate or a post-game sports interview, the communication is incredibly direct.
Right. Very in your face.
But the moment you badge into a corporate American office building or log into your company's Slack workspace, that cowboy myth just completely evaporates. It is an entirely different ecosystem.
It's comically different. Which I guess brings us to the mission of today's deep dive.
Let's get into it.
We are taking the research, the workplace surveys, and the linguistic studies you've brought to us, and we're decoding a highly evolved art form.
American passive-aggressiveness at work.
Yes. Think of this deep dive as your Rosetta Stone for a hidden language. It's a language disguised as extreme politeness.
Right. One that native speakers absorb unconsciously through just years of corporate socialization.
But for international professionals, or really anyone stepping into this environment for the first time, it is utterly bewildering.
Oh, it leaves you incredibly vulnerable. You are essentially playing a high-stakes game where you don't know the rules, you can't see the scoreboard, and the referees are, speaking in code.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why does this culture even exist in the first place?
That's the big question.
Right. If Americans pride themselves on being so direct, why do they transform into these hyper-polite, coded cryptographers the second they sit down at a desk?
To understand that, we have to look at the structural reality of the American workplace, specifically this concept of plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability.
Exactly. But to really grasp why that's the ultimate goal, we need a really quick detour into American labor history.
Okay, take us there.
So, unlike many European nations with robust worker protections and massive labor contracts, the vast majority of the U.S. operates on at-will employment.
Meaning you can be fired at any time for almost any reason, so long as it isn't explicitly discriminatory.
Precisely. And that baseline reality creates an environment vibrating with just low-level existential dread.
Wow, yeah.
Now, combine that at-will vulnerability with an intensely litigious society.
Lawsuits.
Right. Companies are terrified of wrongful termination lawsuits, hostile work environment claims, huge PR disasters. So over the last few decades, human resources departments have ballooned in power.
Because they're the shield.
Exactly. Their primary function, structurally speaking, is risk mitigation. They are there to protect the company from liability.
So the stakes for saying the wrong thing or, expressing frustration the wrong way are astronomically high.
They're career-ending. But here's the friction. Professionals still experience the full, messy range of human emotion.
Right. We're not robots.
Exactly. They still get furious. They still encounter profound incompetence. They still need to express hostility or set boundaries with a colleague who is driving them crazy.
But they can't just yell.
No. If they yell or if they call someone out bluntly in writing, they violate the HR code of conduct. They become the liability.
I'm picturing this like a corporate immune system.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like direct conflict is treated like a foreign virus. If you introduce a virus like blunt anger, The white blood cells of HR will swarm you and just eliminate you from the body.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. So how does the organism survive when it still needs to fight off incompetence?
It adapts.
It creates a workaround. Professionals learn to wrap their hostility in a layer of bubble wrap. They express their anger while maintaining a flawless veneer of friendliness.
So if they get called out.
Right. If they are reported to HR, they can simply point to the polite vocabulary they used and say, gee, I have no idea why Bob is upset. I was just being helpful.
Plausible deniability in action.
Exactly.
And for you listening right now, this is why this deep dive isn't just some fun academic exercise.
No, it's survival.
Misinterpreting these hidden messages can quietly sabotage your career. If you don't know the code, you might be walking through a minefield, marveling at the lovely flowers, completely unaware of the pressure plates beneath your feet.
Which leads us directly to the terrain where the highest number of those landmines are buried.
The inbox.
Yes, asynchronous written communication, specifically the email inbox.
The ultimate liability shield.
It really is. In the American corporate space, email is rarely just about passing along information. Every single keystroke is a calculated risk assessment.
Because it's permanent.
Exactly. It's documented, time-stamped, permanently searchable, and instantly forwardable. People write emails with an invisible audience hovering over their shoulder.
Like the manager or HR.
Or the legal team that might subpoena the server 5 years from now.
So everyone is essentially writing for the archives. And looking at the linguistic data here, there is one phrase that stands out as the absolute trigger.
Oh, I know exactly which one you mean.
The nuclear option of corporate email. I won't even say it yet, but anyone who has worked in an office just felt their blood pressure spike.
4 words. Per my last email.
Per my last email, It's incredible how much tension fits into 4 little words.
It's dense.
But let's look at how the trap actually functions. Because on the surface, if I'm a Martian who just landed on Earth and learned English from a dictionary, this sounds entirely neutral. I was just pointing back to a previous message to be a helpful colleague.
Right. If you take it literally, yes. But the subtext, the actual meaning, is a direct attack on the recipient's competence.
How does it translate?
It translates to, I already provided you with this information. You either ignored it, you skimmed it, or you failed to comprehend it. And I am now explicitly establishing a paper trail of your failure.
It's the digital equivalent of a prosecutor entering Exhibit A into the court record.
That's exactly what it is.
They aren't trying to refresh your memory. They are building a case so that when a project inevitably implodes, the blast radius only hits you.
Precisely.
But I want to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Because I'm playing out a scenario in my head. Let's say I'm working with a guy named Dave. And Dave is notoriously lazy.
We all know a Dave.
Right. I have sent Dave the same spreadsheet 3 times. He emails me again asking for the spreadsheet. Isn't my saying, per my last email, completely justified there? Isn't that just setting a healthy professional boundary against someone taking advantage of my time?
You're touching on the exact reason why this language is so pervasive. Because the frustration behind it is often entirely justified.
Right. Dave is being lazy.
And you are entirely in the right to be annoyed. But the passive-aggressive phrasing is where the trap lies.
So what's the alternative?
Well, assertive boundary setting would be saying, Dave, I sent this on Tuesday and Thursday. When requests are repeated, it slows down my workflow. Can we figure out a better system for you to track these documents?
Ah, I see. That is direct. It addresses the behavior without the sneer.
Exactly. Assertiveness respects both your time and Dave's humanity. Per my last email does neither.
It's just a jab.
Right. It doesn't solve the systemic issue of Dave losing files. It simply punishes him while allowing you to feign innocence. It's a localized strike that leaves toxic residue.
Wow, yeah.
And usually people don't start with that strike. There's an entire escalation protocol that leads up to it.
The escalation ladder. And the very first rung of that ladder is usually draped in an adjective designed to numb you.
Just a friendly reminder.
Yes, the friendly reminder.
The linguistic sleight of hand here is fascinating. By adding friendly or gentle or quick, the sender attempts to inoculate themselves against any accusation of nagging.
Right, like, I'm just being nice.
Exactly. If you get annoyed, you're the unreasonable one. How could you be mad? The reminder was clearly marked friendly.
It's an anesthetic. It numbs the area before the needle goes in.
That's spot on. But the listener needs to understand the math of this escalation.
Okay, break down the math.
Well, the first friendly reminder you receive on a pending task is usually just that mild routine follow-up. We all get busy.
Sure.
But the second friendly reminder about the same task The temperature in the room has dropped.
That's a formal warning.
It is. And if you receive a third friendly reminder from the same person regarding the same deliverable, the sirens should be deafening. You are in serious professional jeopardy.
Because at that point, the sender isn't communicating with you anymore, are they?
No, they are communicating with the archive.
Oof.
They have meticulously documented a pattern of non-responsiveness. They have proven their own persistent, polite attempts to do their job, contrasting it with your failure.
And right at that third stage, the invisible audience is usually about to become very visible.
Which brings us to the strategic deployment of the CC line.
Oh man, the CC line. If email is the battlefield, the CC button is the heavy artillery.
Think about the underlying mechanics of the CC function. If I need a file from you, the most efficient route is a direct one-on-one message.
Right.
If I suddenly reply to our private thread and CC your manager, the dynamic fundamentally shifts.
I mean, my stomach would just drop.
Because I am broadcasting your bottleneck. I am telling your superior, hey, I have exhausted my options with your direct report, and I am making you aware of their failure without having to walk into your office and file a formal complaint.
It's the modern equivalent of standing in the middle of the village square and loudly asking the blacksmith why your horse isn't shod yet.
Yes.
You're leveraging public shame.
Public shame wrapped in corporate efficiency. And the inverse action is equally, if not more, terrifying.
Wait, what do you mean? Taking people off CC?
Exactly. We talk a lot about the danger of being added to a CC chain, but what about the sudden, silent removal of people from a chain?
I always have a moment of relief when a huge thread drops down to just 2 people. My instinct is, great, fewer emails cluttering my inbox.
That's the natural reaction.
But looking at the sociology of the workplace, I should probably be terrified, shouldn't I?
It should certainly trigger your situational awareness. When an ongoing thread with multiple stakeholders suddenly drops the managers or the wider team off the CC line, the sender is signaling a major shift in the rules of engagement.
Like taking it out to the parking lot.
They are essentially closing the door to the conference room and pulling down the blinds.
The panopticon effect is paused. The watchers are gone.
Right. And that means one of 2 things is about to happen. Either the sender wants to drop the HR filter entirely and have an authentic, messy, potentially productive argument to hash out a problem which can actually be healthy.
Which is rare, but possible.
Right. Or, far more dangerously, they are about to say something so aggressive, so unvarnished, or so politically risky that they refuse to have it documented in front of leadership. The audience has been dismissed, which means you are now in an unfiltered zone.
Okay, so email acts as this incredible defensive shield to document the failures of others. But what about offense? What happens when you can't just passively wait for someone to fail, but you actively have to correct a mistake they've made?
This is where we encounter a phenomenon we can call the velvet glove.
The velvet glove. You still have to deliver the punch, but you pad the fist so there's no visible bruising.
Think about the cultural collision here. In many direct cultures, say, a Dutch or German corporate environment, if a colleague presents incorrect data, you might simply say, that figure is wrong. The correct number is X.
And no one cries.
Exactly. It is viewed as an objective exchange of facts in service of the project. But in the hypersensitive, liability-averse American workplace, direct correction is frequently interpreted as a personal attack.
A threat to their ego, which could lead to an HR mediation about workplace hostility.
So instead of direct correction, we get the phrase, just to clarify.
Oh, the faux magnanimity of just to clarify.
It's everywhere.
It sounds like we are on a magical journey of mutual discovery. Oh, I'm just clarifying.
That is the brilliance of the phrasing. The surface meaning is helpful collaboration. The sender steps in to clear away the fog for the good of the team.
But what's the real meaning?
The structural reality of the phrase is deeply condescending. The subtext reads, you are either incompetent or deeply careless. I am publicly correcting your error, but by framing it as a mere clarification, I position myself as a generous mentor rather than an adversary.
And if you get defensive, you look insane. Because they were just clarifying.
Right, you'd look completely unreasonable.
It's maddening.
Yeah.
But there is a cousin to this phrase that I think is even more linguistically impressive. And that is, I think there might be some confusion here.
Yes.
Oh.
If you break down the grammar of that sentence, it is a masterpiece of conflict avoidance.
Because it doesn't point a finger.
Notice the reliance on the passive voice and conditional phrasing. They do not say, you are confused, that is an accusation. They say, there might be some confusion.
As if confusion is an ambient weather event. A low-pressure system of confusion just drifted into the Zoom call. No one knows where it came from.
Yes. But the underlying reality is perfectly clear to everyone involved. The subtext is, I am not confused. I have absolute mastery of this topic. You are entirely confused. But I am going to spare your ego by pretending this confusion is a mysterious third party that has afflicted us both.
It's cognitive dissonance in real time. Your brain hears the polite words, but your nervous system feels the insult.
It's a very specific kind of exhaustion.
Which actually brings me to a phrase that completely tripped me up, because when I first encountered this in the research, I thought, wait, this one sounds like a genuine compliment.
Let me guess.
The phrase is, as I'm sure you're aware.
You are definitely not alone in that interpretation. Many professionals, particularly those who are earlier in their careers or new to the U.S. corporate culture, hear that and feel validated.
Right. If someone emails me and says, as I'm sure you're aware, the compliance documents require triple signatures.
Yeah.
I feel like they are acknowledging me as a peer. They think, wow, the senior manager recognizes my competence. They know that I know this.
It is a trap.
Oh, man.
This is a rhetorical trap designed to look like a compliment.
How does the trap snap shut?
We can call this tactic documentation through implication.
Documentation through implication. Okay.
When Talik says, as I'm sure you're aware, the underlying intent is actually highly adversarial.
What are they really saying?
They are communicating. You absolutely should know this protocol. The fact that your recent actions suggest you don't know it is deeply concerning. But rather than ask you if you know it, which gives you the chance to admit ignorance and ask for help, I am going to state out loud that I assume you know it.
Oh, wow. They are cementing my position.
They're preemptively destroying your excuses.
Yeah.
In the legal world, there's a concept called constructive knowledge.
What's that?
It's the idea that even if you didn't know something, you should have known it, so you are held liable anyway. This phrase brings constructive knowledge into corporate email.
That is devious.
Once they put, as I'm sure you're aware in writing, you can never, ever claim ignorance in the future.
Because if you mess up the compliance document, you can't say, oh, nobody trained me on the triple signature.
Exactly. They have already documented that you are aware.
It's like painting someone into a corner with the most elegant, polite paintbrush imaginable. You're trapped by their assumption of your brilliance.
And we see a similar mechanism at play with another classic line, correct me if I'm wrong, but...
Which, to be absolutely clear to the listener, is never an actual invitation to correct them.
Never. Not once.
And rhetorical.
If a colleague begins a sentence with, correct me if I'm wrong, they are operating with 100% certainty that they are right. They are holding the winning lottery ticket.
So why ask?
They are about to deliver a contradictory fact that completely dismantles your argument, but they are framing it as a humble, vulnerable question to soften the blow.
And if you take the bait?
If you actually try to correct them, you will trigger a massive conflict. Because they weren't asking a question, they were declaring victory.
It's astonishing how much intellectual energy goes into avoiding the mere appearance of friction.
It's exhausting just talking about it.
Which leads me to one of my favorite tactics we're exploring today, because it literally messes with the space-time continuum of feedback.
Ah, yes.
It's the phrase, going forward.
The retroactive critique. This is perhaps the most elegant tool in the American management playbook.
Unpack the mechanics of a retroactive critique. How do you critique something backward by looking forward?
Let's look at the failure state of normal management. An employee makes a major error, say, they send a raw data file to a client instead of the polished summary.
Huge mistake.
A blunt manager might pull them aside and say, what you did yesterday was a disaster. It made us look amateurish. Don't do it again.
Direct, backward-looking, identifying the error, addressing it. But as we established, that triggers defensiveness.
It creates a confrontation. The employee feels attacked. They might cry. They might get angry. HR might get involved.
So what's the pivot?
Instead of dealing with the past, the manager pivots to the future. They say, going forward, let's make sure we always route client deliverables through the success team for a final polish.
It's like a brand new policy announcement. Like the whole team is embarking on a bright, innovative new future together.
But it's not a new policy. It is a direct condemnation of what just happened.
It's a ghost policy.
Exactly. It's a way of saying, your past behavior was unacceptable, but I am going to spare us both the agony of a direct confrontation by establishing a new rule that implicitly outlaws your specific mistake.
So for the listener, if you hear the phrase, going forward, You need to immediately run a mental diagnostic of your actions over the last 48 hours.
Instantly.
Because going forward almost always translates to what you just did backward was terrible.
You have to decode it instantly. It is a gentle correction, but it is a binding correction.
Because it sets a new baseline.
Right. Once the going forward baseline is established, if you make the error again, the manager can escalate to formal discipline without guilt because they already gave you the gentle pivot.
Okay. We have thoroughly mapped out the asynchronous safety of the written screen. You have time to sit at your laptop, draft your passive-aggressive response, delete it, soften the adjectives, and hit send.
A luxury of time.
But I want to elevate the pressure now. I want to move this deep dive into the live theater of meetings, or the modern equivalent, the Zoom grid.
The live arena, where the pressure to appear constantly polite while actively dissecting a colleague's ideas is at its absolute peak.
Because in a meeting, you don't have 20 minutes to craft the perfect going forward. You have milliseconds.
And nowhere to hide.
And this environment produces some of the most heartbreaking cultural misunderstandings we see in the data, particularly for our international listeners. And the heartbreak almost always starts with a single word. That's an interesting idea. This one kills me because it preys on your best instincts.
It really does.
If you come from a culture where intellectual debate is a sign of respect, where leaning over the table, challenging a premise, and wrestling with a concept means you value the speaker's brain, being told your idea is interesting feels like high praise.
Right. In many European, Middle Eastern, or Latin American business cultures, if a senior leader calls your proposal interesting, it means it has merit, it has weight.
It's stimulating enough to demand exploration.
But inside an American conference room.
Inside an American conference room, unless that word is accompanied by genuine, visible enthusiasm, immediate follow-up questions, and a request for a second meeting.
Then what is it?
Interesting is a diplomatic synonym for bad.
It's a conversational life raft.
That is precisely how it functions. Imagine the scenario. A junior employee pitches an idea that is fundamentally flawed, wildly over budget, or completely politically tone deaf to the current goals of the company.
Oh, I've been in that room.
The room goes dead silent. The senior director does not want to say, "That will never work, please stop talking."
Because that humiliates the employee publicly and kills morale.
So the director grabs the life raft, they nod slowly and say, that's an interesting idea.
It acknowledges that sound waves left your mouth and entered their ears without endorsing a single syllable of the content.
It allows the meeting to move on without a casualty.
And you see similar non-endorsements deployed all the time. Like, that's one approach.
Meaning, that is an approach that exists in the universe, but we will absolutely not be taking it.
Or, I see where you're coming from.
Meaning, I can trace the deeply flawed logic path you walk down, but I fundamentally reject your destination.
And then, of course, there is the linguistic divergence that causes massive international friction, a phrase that literally means the exact opposite depending on which side of the Atlantic you are on.
Well, I know this one. Let's table that.
Yes.
The US versus UK translation error. This has derailed so many multinational projects.
It is a stunning semantic drift. In British English, parliamentary procedure dictates that to table an idea means to lay it on the table for immediate discussion. You are bringing it forward into the light.
Like, this is urgent, let's table it so we can figure it out right now.
Exactly. But in American workplace parlance, to table something means to remove it from the table. You are putting it in a drawer. You are shelving it, burying it, and walking away.
Burying it without the courtesy of a funeral.
If an American manager says, let's table that for now, they are assassinating the idea indefinitely, but framing it as a mere temporary pause to spare your feelings. The idea is dead, but they told you it's just taking a nap.
It's all about maintaining the illusion of consensus, which actually brings us to another meeting tactic that feels so deeply manipulative once you understand the mechanics of it. The phrase, I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
The theater of fake collaboration.
Right, because inherently, asking for someone's thoughts is the ultimate sign of professional respect. You're telling me my brain is valuable to you. You want my input to make the work better.
And we must be clear here, so listeners don't become totally paranoid. Sometimes they genuinely do want your thoughts. Collaboration does exist.
Sure.
But the listener needs to develop a radar for timing and specificity to determine if it's real or fake.
Walk me through how the timing gives away the game.
Let's look at the classic Friday afternoon drop. It's 4 p.m. on a Friday. A colleague sends you a 60-page, beautifully formatted, deeply researched project proposal that is due to the Executive Steering Committee on Monday morning at 8 a.m.
And the email reads?
I'd love to get your thoughts on this before we submit.
Oh, they do not want your thoughts.
They would be horrified if you actually gave them your thoughts. The cake is fully baked. The structural decisions have been locked in for weeks. They are asking for your input in a window of time where it is practically impossible for you to provide meaningful architectural feedback without ruining your weekend.
So why ask it all? Why not just send it to the executives and leave me out of it?
Because of the political currency of consensus. By asking for your thoughts, they're buying a shield. If you reply with a quick, looks fine to me, or even if you just don't have time to reply at all before Monday, they get to walk into the executive boardroom and say, the whole cross-functional team was aligned on this direction.
Wow. They're using my silence as an endorsement.
Exactly.
They get all the optics of deep collaboration without enduring the messy, ego-bruising reality of actually having their work critiqued.
It's brilliant in a dark way. But here's where it gets really interesting. What happens when the dynamic is reversed and they actually do have to critique you?
Oh, right.
Live, on a call, in front of other people. We talked about the velvet glove in asynchronous email, but verbally it requires a different kind of psychological padding. It requires a sedative.
The famous compliment sandwich.
Yes, the cornerstone of early 2000s American management training.
It's a classic for a reason.
The psychological theory behind it is that humans process negative feedback better if their ego is first stroked by positive reinforcement. So, you place the heavy meat of your criticism firmly between two fluffy, delicious pieces of bread, the compliments.
Your slide deck is visually stunning, but the financial projections are completely divorced from reality, though I really love the font you chose for the headers.
It sounds absurd when we compress it, but that is the exact structure. However, the listener needs to tune their auditory processing specifically to the word but.
The pivot.
In American professional discourse, everything that precedes the word but is an anesthetic. It is decorative. It is designed solely to lower your heart rate and prevent your fight or flight response from activating.
The actual substantive message, the thing you will be graded on, begins the millisecond after the but.
Yes. And if we look at the evolution of corporate communication, modern leadership coaching has actually recognized that employees have caught on to the but. The sandwich became too obvious.
People started bracing for impact the moment they heard a compliment.
Exactly. So the coaching evolved, they swapped the conjunction, they replaced but with and.
Which, psychologically speaking, is so much more insidious.
It is a brilliant hijacking of therapeutic language. A manager trained in this modern style will look at you and say, your report is incredibly thorough, and the conclusions need more hard evidence.
It feels like an addition rather than a contradiction.
Linguistically, it feels additive. It feels like we are building a house together and I'm just adding another brick to your strong foundation.
But functionally.
Functionally, practically, the meaning is identical to using but. The criticism is the same. The necessity for you to go back to your desk and redo 3 days of work is the same. It just masks the negative feedback so deeply under the guise of collaboration that you don't even realize you've been criticized until the meeting is over.
Okay, we've decoded the paper trail. We've decoded the illusion of consensus and the fake collaboration in meetings. But diving deeper into the research you brought, there is a level of passive aggressiveness that is so advanced, it honestly borders on psychological warfare.
It really does.
It feels like the PhD level of corporate survival.
You're referring to the phenomenon of weaponized positivity.
Weaponized positivity. That phrase alone is chilling. How are we defining this?
Weaponized positivity is the strategic use of aggressively upbeat, cheerful, almost saccharine language to mask deep frustration, impatience, or contempt.
Why do you consider this the PhD level?
Because it is the absolute perfection of plausible deniability. We talked earlier about HR as the corporate immune system.
Right.
If a colleague yells at you, you can report them. If they use a clumsy compliment sandwich, you can at least parse the feedback and defend your work. But how on earth do you go to an HR representative and lodge a formal complaint that your colleague is being too nice to you?
You would sound totally unhinged.
Yeah.
Cheryl keeps sending me exclamation points and wishing me a wonderful weekend, and it is destroying my mental health. They would look at you like you were crazy.
Exactly. The victim is completely immobilized by the cheerful framing. The aggression is invisible to the system, but highly visible to the target.
Let's look at some of the prime examples of this from the data. The first one is exaggerated gratitude. The phrase, "Thanks so much for getting back to me."
As always, context dictates the subtext. If you send a complex question to a colleague, and they answer it within 10 minutes and you reply, "Thanks so much for getting back to me," that is genuine, healthy gratitude. The words match the reality.
But what if I am the bottleneck? What if I take 4 days to answer an urgent, simple question?
Then the phrase transforms into a spotlight. "Thanks so much for getting back to me," sent after a massive, unacceptable delay, is actually highlighting your failure. It is dripping with sarcasm.
Oh, I can feel it.
It implies, "I had genuinely given up all hope of ever hearing from you. My workflow has been stalled for a week, and your eventual response is a miracle." It's a socially acceptable way of screaming about your delay while using the stationery of a thank you note.
That stings. What about the concept of forgiveness? Because in any ethical framework, forgiveness is a fundamentally positive, healing action. But in the corporate world, the phrase "no worries at all" can be a dagger.
"No worries at all" is perhaps the most treacherous phrase in the modern open plan office, particularly when it is followed by the second half of the combo.
Which is?
"I went ahead and handled it myself."
Oof. No worries, I did your job for you.
Let's track a scenario to see how this plays out politically. You miss a deadline on a Friday morning to pull some data for a joint presentation.
Okay.
Your colleague, instead of messaging you to ask where it is, quietly steps in, finishes the data pull, builds the slide, and sends it to the department head.
No.
Then, and only then, do they email you. "No worries at all. I know you were swamped, so I went ahead and handled it myself."
The subtext there is radioactive.
It is, because there are, in fact, intense worries. They are communicating a multi-layered message. You are inadequate. You dropped the ball. I am now absorbing extra labor because of your incompetence. But crucially, by completing the work and sending that cheerful, forgiving email, they are seizing control of the narrative.
A narrative for the boss.
Exactly. They're positioning themselves as the ultimate martyr, the selfless, highly competent team player who swoops in at the 11th hour to save the project while subtly cementing your permanent reputation as unreliable.
And the most brilliant part, you cannot be angry with them, you can't confront them, because they just helped you, they rescued you. You are forced to thank your assassin.
It is brilliant and terrifying. And it usually ends with a piece of punctuation that, after reading this research, makes my blood run cold.
The smiley face emoji.
Yes.
I have to pause on this. How can a smiley face be hostile? I mean, historically, emoji started as a way to inject warmth and informal rapport into cold digital text. It's a literal smile.
It goes back to cognitive dissonance. Think about the juxtaposition of the text and the image. If someone sends you an email that fundamentally corrects your work, or points out a painfully obvious procedural fact that you should have known, or documents your failure to meet a deadline.
Right.
And they end that surgical strike of an email with, "Hope this helps," smiley face.
It's condescension. Pure, uncut condescension. Dripping with it. The smiley face is doing very specific, aggressive rhetorical work in that context. It says, "I am being so aggressively, performatively pleasant about correcting your incompetence that you cannot possibly interpret this as hostile, even though we both know it is." It dares you to take offense.
It's the equivalent of patting a 35-year-old professional on the head. It infantilizes the recipient. You're treating them like a toddler who just spilled their juice.
Which is exactly why it infuriates the recipient so deeply. Their professional dignity is being attacked, but the weapon is a cartoon smile.
Okay, I have to take a breath here. Because with all these landmines exposed, that per my last emails, the retroactive going forwards, the fake meeting collaboration, the weaponized smiley faces, a listener might honestly feel terrified to ever open their laptop again.
I wouldn't blame them.
Right. If every polite phrase is actually a hitty dagger, how do we pull back from total paranoia? Because surely not every single interaction in corporate America is a covert attack. That is a vital distinction to make. If you adopt a mindset where you read hostile subtext into every single interaction, you will become deeply cynical, you will burn out, and ironically, you will become a toxic presence yourself.
Okay, so what's the goal?
The goal of decoding this language isn't to induce paranoia. The goal is what sociologists call contextual literacy.
Contextual literacy. Building the muscle to read the room. How do we do that?
By evaluating the variables surrounding the message, rather than hyperfixating just on the words themselves, you have to look at the holistic picture. First, evaluate the sender's typical baseline style.
Right. If Bob from accounting always writes, "Hope this helps smiley face" to literally everyone, even when he's just sharing the cafeteria lunch menu, then it's not a weapon, it's just Bob. That's his baseline.
Exactly. You also have to evaluate your relationship history with the sender. Have you been missing deadlines with this person? Has there been recent friction on a project? If the relationship is strained, the likelihood of passive-aggressiveness increases.
That makes
You look at the CC line as leadership suddenly included. You look at the timing. Is it a Friday at 4 p.m.?
You're taking the emotional temperature of the environment.
Yes. Contextual literacy is about zooming out and asking a logical question. Does the current situation actually warrant a passive-aggressive response? If everything is running smoothly, your deliverables are on time, and your manager says, just to clarify, they might actually just be clarifying a confusing data point. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
But speaking of context and the holistic picture, the research brings up a really sensitive but absolutely vital distinction.
Yeah.
Because sometimes what looks like passive-aggressiveness is actually something much heavier, especially for international professionals or minorities operating in historically homogenous corporate spaces.
Yes, we have to talk about that. We have to draw a hard line between cultural passive-aggressiveness, the standard corporate song and dance of liability avoidance, and actual microaggressions.
Right. Coded exclusion that is disguised as politeness.
The sociolinguistic reality of navigating a secondary culture is exhausting. The data provides some very clear examples of how politeness is used to enforce otherness. Imagine an international professional gives a flawless, highly technical presentation to the board.
Okay.
Afterward, a senior colleague comes up, smiles warmly, and says, "Wow, your English is so good."
On the surface, if you run it through the dictionary, it's a compliment.
On the surface. But the subtext, the impact of the phrase, regardless of intent, is an implication of surprise.
Right.
It communicates, based on your background, your name, or your appearance, I inherently did not expect you to be this articulate or competent. It highlights their status as an outsider.
Or the example in the data of constantly being asked to repeat that in meetings.
When your message was perfectly clear, the audio connection was fine, but the listener is weaponizing your accent to undermine your authority, stall your momentum, or mark you as difficult to understand.
Or the classic defense mechanism. That's just how we do things here. Someone offers a brilliant perspective from their home culture or a previous global role, and it's shut down with a smile.
Which is a polite, structurally sound way of shutting down diverse thinking and enforcing assimilation. You are welcome to be here as long as you act exactly like us.
How does the research advise professionals to handle that? Because reacting to a microaggression feels entirely different and much heavier than just dodging a friendly reminder about a spreadsheet.
The advice requires a difficult balance of discernment and grace. Many Americans, frankly, lack deep global cultural awareness. A colleague might say, "Your English is so good with genuine, albeit incredibly clumsy, positive intent." They are trying to build rapport and failing.
So the strategy is to assume positive intent first. Give them the benefit of the doubt.
Initially, yes. You don't want to detonate a relationship over a clumsy first offense. But, and this is the crucial pivot if the pattern is persistent.
A pattern.
If the same person is constantly asking you to repeat yourself in front of executives, or consistently shutting down your international perspective with how we do things here, it ceases to be clumsiness. It becomes a hostile pattern of exclusion.
And what's the advice then?
And the advice is unequivocal. It must be addressed directly or escalated to HR. You do not have to absorb persistent structural exclusion just because the person delivering it is using a polite tone of voice.
Okay. I feel like we have successfully built the Rosetta Stone. We understand the historical liability shield, we see the velvet glove, we've decoded the fake collaboration, the weaponized positivity, and we know how to apply contextual literacy. We see the matrix.
The question now is, what do you do with this vision?
Exactly. The deep dive has to shift from theory to actionable strategy. How do you, the listener, navigate this landscape without adopting the same corrosive habits? How do you survive the game without becoming a passive-aggressive monster yourself?
The behavioral data outlines a very clear playbook for this. 5 core principles of response that protect your reputation while de-escalating the toxicity.
Let's explore the playbook. Principle 1.
Principle 1 is the most difficult to execute in the heat of the moment because it goes against every human instinct. Do not mirror the behavior.
Oh, but it is so incredibly tempting.
Isn't it?
Someone hits you with a "per my last email," and every defensive instinct in your body wants to reply, As I clearly stated in my previous response, which you evidently missed, you want to fire a missile back.
Of course you do. Your ego is bruised. But mirroring creates an immediate, irreparable toxic spiral. If two people decide to engage in a coded, passive-aggressive Cold War, it destroys the working relationship entirely.
And it spreads.
It bleeds into the wider team. And frankly, the person who initiated the passive-aggressiveness is usually a veteran of the game. They are better at it than you are. The house always wins. Don't play on their turf.
Building on that, if I can't shoot back, what is my counter move? That leads to principle 2.
Radical transparency and warmth.
Killing the subtext with absolute sincerity.
Yes. Let's role-play a scenario to see how this neutralizes the threat. Let's say you owe me a data report, and you are 2 days late. I decide to be passive-aggressive. I email you, and I CC your manager, and I write, "Hi there, just sending a friendly reminder that the data pull was due on Tuesday. Hope your week is going well." Smiley face.
Okay, I literally feel my heart rate rising just hearing that scenario.
It works.
My instinct is to make excuses, blame the software, or be snarky. But using radical transparency, I'm going to take a breath. I hit reply all, making sure the manager's still CC'd so they see my professionalism.
Perfect.
And I write, "Hi, you are absolutely right, and I sincerely apologize for the delay. I ran into a bottleneck with the software, but that is entirely on me for not communicating the delay to you sooner. I have prioritized this, and you will have the complete file in your inbox by 2 p.m. today. Thank you so much for your patience."
That is a masterclass response. It is perfect.
If we break down the mechanics of why it works, what did I just do?
You denied the sender the satisfaction of a coded fight. First, you didn't get defensive, which makes their passive aggression look petty in front of the manager. Second, you owned the mistake without wallowing in self-pity.
Right.
Third, you provided a specific, actionable timeline for resolution 2 p.m. And finally, you ended with genuine warmth. You completely disarmed their weaponized positivity by being actually positive. They have nowhere to go. The conflict is over.
But let's look at the failure state of radical transparency. What if Bob just will not stop? I'm transparent, I apologize, but week after week, Bob is still sending smiley faces, still CCing the boss over minor issues. I can't just keep being a punching bag.
And you shouldn't be. That brings us to principle 3, address directly, but privately.
You have to break the digital barrier, take it offline.
Yes. If the passive aggressiveness is a persistent, documented pattern, you need to change the medium of communication. You schedule a one-on-one video call, or if you're in the office, you pull them aside into a room. And the script for this intervention is very specific.
Give me the script. How do I confront them without triggering HR?
You look them in the eye and say, "I've sensed some tension in our recent exchanges. Is there an issue with our workflow that we should address?"
Wow. That is incredibly direct. It pierces right through the bubble wrap.
It does, but notice the architecture of the phrasing. It frames the issue around the relationship and the workflow, not around an accusation.
Because you aren't saying you were being a passive-aggressive jerk.
Exactly. That would make them defensive. You are saying, "I care about our working dynamic and I sense a block." It removes their need for coded behavior because you are explicitly granting them a safe private space to be direct. It positions you as the emotionally mature party in the dynamic.
I love that. It forces them to either air their genuine grievance or retreat and drop the behavior.
Okay.
Principle 4.
Principle 4 is your insurance policy. Document everything.
Keep the receipts.
Yes. Not out of malice, and not because you want to be a tattletale, but because, as we discussed at the very beginning regarding the HR liability culture, written documentation is the ultimate arbiter in U.S. corporate disputes.
It's all that matters.
If a colleague's coded behavior is building toward a genuine conflict that could impact your performance review, you need a private record. Save the emails, take screenshots, write down timestamps and objective notes of strange interactions.
Protect yourself in the clinches. If they're building a case against you with friendly reminders, you need a counter dossier of reality.
Always. You hope you never need it, but you must have it.
And the final principle, principle 5. This really feels like the culmination of the entire deep dive, the ultimate goal of professional communication.
Develop an assertive but warm style.
Because the opposite of passive-aggressive isn't aggressive, it's assertive.
Exactly. To really cement this, the behavioral research draws a brilliant contrast between 4 different communication styles using a single hypothetical scenario, a missed data deadline. Let's look at how the 4 styles handle the exact same frustration.
Okay, lay out the 4 quadrants.
Quadrant 1 is the aggressive style. The colleague storms to your desk or sends an all-caps message, "This is unacceptable, you missed the deadline and ruined my entire morning."
High directness, zero warmth. It addresses the problem, but disregards the other person's humanity completely.
Quadrant 2 is the passive style. You say absolutely nothing, you suffer in silence, you stay late and do the work yourself, and you build up massive internal resentment until you eventually burn out and quit.
Zero directness, zero respect for your own feelings and boundaries.
Quadrant 3 is the subject of today's deep dive, the passive-aggressive style. No worries at all. I pulled the data myself, smiley face.
Complete manipulation. Disregards the other person's dignity while pretending to respect them.
And finally, Quadrant 4, the assertive style, the gold standard. Hey, I noticed the data wasn't ready this morning, which put me in a tough spot for my presentation. Can we make a plan for tomorrow and figure out a buffer for next time?
That is just, well, it's so incredibly clean.
It's clean because it respects both parties equally. It is direct about the problem. There is no subtext, no hidden meanings, no guessing. I was hurt by your action. But it is warm and collaborative in seeking a solution. It doesn't punish the past. It plans for the future.
If you communicate like that, you don't even need the Rosetta Stone because you aren't speaking in code anymore. You are speaking clearly.
When you master assertive warmth, you become the person in the office that people trust because they know they never have to read between the lines with you. The mental load of working with you is zero.
What an incredible journey today's deep dive has been. We started with this global paradox, the enduring myth of the blunt, straight-shooting American cowboy versus the murky, anxiety-ridden reality of the heavily armored corporate American.
We explored the historical architecture of why that armor exists. At will employment, the HR liability shield, and the constant, desperate quest for plausible deniability.
We decoded the asynchronous email minefield. We felt the velvet glove of the clarification. We sat in the live theater of fake collaboration in meetings, and we stared into the terrifying depths of a weaponized smiley face.
But more importantly, we mapped a way out. A playbook for maintaining your sanity, your reputation, and your professionalism through contextual literacy and assertive warmth.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, slightly provocative thought. A lot of the research suggested a great homework exercise looking back through your emails to spot these coded phrases from other people, to practice your radar.
It is a great way to build that contextual literacy muscle.
It is. But I want you to turn the mirror around. Before you close your laptop today, take a look at your own outbox. Look at the last month of your sent mail. Have you been absorbing this coded language without even realizing it? Have you assimilated into the matrix?
It happens so easily. It is workplace osmosis. We adopt the dialect of our environment to survive.
So the next time your fingers hover over the keyboard to type just a friendly reminder, or the next time you go to add a smiley face to a correction just to soften the blow so you don't feel awkward, pause. Ask yourself, what is the actual subtext you are sending into the world? Are you communicating clearly and assertively, or are you just muddying the X-ray?
That is the ultimate question. Because at the end of the day, the clarity of your communication dictates the quality of your professional relationships.
Keep the X-ray clean. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.